Behind the Shades.
Hello, Kat. How are you doing today?
I'm wonderful. How are you, Train?
I am well, as we discussed. You're going to a barbecue, which is making me so jealous, but I promise I will get food somehow. I won't steal it, but I'll figure it out.
You will do it.
So I know today you're joining us to speak about parenting and the beautiful journey of that. So how about this? How about we get right into it? But before you share with us what makes you such an amazing parent and what you learned along the way, introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll go from there.
Sure. My name's Kat Mullin, and I'm a holistic healing practitioner as well as a certified NLP master breakthrough coach. And my focus, I have a heart for families 100%. My focus is around self-awareness and communication, because those are the things that are going to break these generational patterns that we keep passing down. I'm also a best-selling author. My book is, where are you? Raising Badass Humans. There you go. And a speaker.
Perfect, perfect. So for those who are wondering, you won't get a free copy of the book. No, I'm just joking. The book is amazing. And I told her before, I'm going to tell her again. The title, I love that title.
Thank you. It's a little
So
controversial, but it catches attention.
I know, like, and the imagery is like, pick me up, right? The book, very warm colors. So tell us, how did you start this journey of wanting to assist parents in this way? And what pushed you to say, hey, let's figure this out. Let's figure this out, because there isn't a manual for being a parent, but I want to pay it forward and help parents who are looking for assistance.
So I struggled for many years to get pregnant. And, I assumed that once I finally did, it would just be like, oh, life is wonderful. Even though I had 13 nieces and nephews, and I knew it's hard to be a parent, you don't know until you're really in the thick of it. And then I had two, and then I had three, and it just gets harder and harder. And all these generational patterns that had been handed down to me that I thought I had dealt with really started coming out. Nothing will bring you back to those patterns like being a mom. When you're overtired, stressed out, have 1,000 things to do every day, and every moment you're pulled in every direction. All of a sudden I was screaming at little children, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, this is not the mom I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be the mom doing yoga and meditating with my children, and everything's beautiful. And instead I'm screaming at them to get them out the door, and finding myself literally in a fetal position on the floor crying because I had so much guilt over it all. And it wasn't until I started understanding what generational patterns are, how they get handed down to you through the generations, that I finally was like, I need to work on this and I need to fix this. And that's when I dug into NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming, which gets to the unconscious mind, because that's where you need to heal things to make a lasting change. And once I started doing that and was able to see where all this stuff was coming from and starting to heal it, I found these ways to connect with my children that are breaking the patterns. And I wanted to share that. So I put it all down in my book. The subtitle is 14 Intentional Connections That Nurture Your Child's Emotional Intelligence and Sense of Self-Worth.
I know many women experience difficulty trying to get pregnant because many women want to be a mother.
Yes.
Right. And they want to be the best mother that they can be.
Absolutely.
But I think in general, that is something that they want to be mom number one. Yeah. I don't think any mom or dad goes into her saying, you know what, I'm going to try my best, but I know I'm going to be a jackass.
Yeah, I'm going to suck at this.
Yeah. If I lose them, if they die, they die. Right. I don't think anyone has that kind of conversation. But I hope not too. But one thing that I will say is it's like marriage, it's like dating, even though it's different. There's so many self-help books, but there isn't really one that can fit every single person. So when you were navigating your journey, where were you pulling your inspiration, your direction from? Because you started off trying to get pregnant, trying to figure it out, and now you're like, hey, I think I can actually pass down some wisdom to break the generational trauma and experiences that many of us have.
A lot of my inspiration comes from my sister. I'm the youngest of 7. My sister, who's 7 years older than me, passed away at the age of 45 because she literally drank herself to death. Because we come from a generation of you don't talk about something if it's uncomfortable. Traumas happen to you and you shove them down. And she was never allowed to express the things that were so painful for her. And she hid it so well. She would walk into a room and she would have the brightest smile out of anyone in the room. She had the loudest laugh. Everyone was attracted to her and believed she was truly happy, happy, happy. When inside she was dying, she was in so much pain and she was masking that. And when I started noticing these patterns after I had my children, and I started noticing my kids were starting to take on mine and my husband's behaviors. They started having depression. They started having anger management issues. They started people pleasing. That's when I was like, no, this can't happen anymore. Something really has to be done about this. And you just correlated it to dating. And it really is. One of my chapters in my book is called Date Your Kids, because it is so important to spend one-on-one time with them, especially when you have multiples. Because nothing grows their sense of self-worth like paying attention to them. And you take them just for a few hours, once a month is what I try and do. I take one out at a time. We maybe go to lunch, maybe we have a picnic, maybe we do a hike, maybe we go to a movie. I let them pick because what they're interested in, they need to know is important. So I make it all about them. That's when they start to feel comfortable. They start to share things that are going on in their life and we can talk about it. And it really, really grows their emotional intelligence.
I know for me, I have a brother and a sister, both younger. My brother is the middle child. And there's always this joke that the middle child falls between the cracks, right? Like the firstborn gets everything, which is me, because they're the ones who have like 1,000 godparents, right? Everybody wants to be a godparent for the first one.
So true.
And the last one is always the baby. And the middle one, although in my experience, they seem to get the most attention because whatever went wrong with the first child, you're not going to repeat with the second.
Right.
Right. And some parents, when they tell me, they're like, Terrain, what I do is always try to make sure I have an even number of children to avoid the middle child, right? So they would have 2, 4, 6, 8, and they would try to figure out, but they would either do them within a year together, so there isn't that gap, or what they'll do is they'll do the first, figure it out, and then the second, third, and fourth, they'll be closer together so they can grow up together.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you have a number of children. Is there a big age between them? And if so, or if not, how did you navigate dating your children when you're trying to allocate not only your time for yourself, your husband, but all these other children as well?
Right. So my children are each 3 years apart. That was not on purpose. I very much wanted them to be boom, 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 so they could really grow up and be super connected together. However, biologically, it just wasn't working. And so they did come out 3 years apart. I really believe that, that first one, like you said, gets so much attention. especially when we had been trying for years and then everybody's so excited for us, we finally had a baby. Everybody's right there. And that second one doesn't get the same attention. I do everything in my power to make sure she feels just as important as her older sister and her younger brother. And I still see it, though. I still see the differences. I see the favoritism towards my oldest. I also see that I'm harder on my oldest, even though I try my best not to be. But how I allegate that is I would do it when either grandma can watch the kids or dad could watch the kids. Currently, we're in a situation where I'm the only adult in the house. Now, we had a different kind of lifestyle. We traveled in our RV for maybe 4 years. So we have a very small, close-knit home. So even though they have age difference, they're together all the time. And I have seen that that has helped with their closeness for sure. And so we live in a giant campground that has multiple neighborhoods. It's actually a really cool setting. And it's a place I'm very comfortable with my kids being. So I can take one and just like go to the campground store, get a snack, and we can go for a walk through the woods together while the other two are at the neighbor's house or something.
That's good that you do that because you're paying attention and you're aware. Mm-hmm. Do you have parents that come up to you and they may feel that that isn't the case, but then when you come into the picture and you're helping them along, you're like, that actually is the case. I can see who's your favorite, which one you pay the least amount of attention to, and the one, and I think this is a fortunate situation where there's that child that is yearning for that connection, that is basically almost screaming out for it, but they don't necessarily get it. Have you seen that as well?
I have, and you know, it's hard to bring it to their attention in a gentle way, but it is definitely possible because they're not aware of it. And it's all about being self-aware. And once they are, they can be like, oh, I didn't even see I was doing that. I didn't see how I was showing favoritism here. And so then they are thankfully grateful and can make the necessary changes to make sure everybody feels comfortable. And I've had a lot of parents be like, well, yeah, that's great and all, but I can't afford to take my kids on dates. Like, you don't have to pay a penny for it. A hike doesn't cost anything. A picnic doesn't cost you any more money than you already spent on the groceries in your house. They just want to be with you. They just want to know they matter to you. And that's the most important thing.
I think sometimes we underestimate the value of time and how it's worth more than any form of currency that man, women have ever created, right?
Absolutely. And the time, not even the quantity, but the quality of that time spent together.
Yes. Like you mentioned, like the hike. And the reason why I always like to go back to, let's say, like a work analogy or a dating analogy is we get into this habit sometimes that if we're not spending X amount of dollars, that we can't have a good time.
Yeah, it's true.
Right?
And that's some people's love language. And I've had to, like, their grandma, bless her, she has the biggest heart and gives them so much. But her love language is gifts. And I'm a minimalist. So that's something I had to get over myself to be like, that's how she shows her grandkids love. And that's okay. And they know she loves them. Whereas for me, it's let me take you on a walk. Let's talk. Let's have a deep conversation. Everyone has different love languages, and that's how she shows up for them.
And I think that's where people would probably need to understand what their children's are, because it's fine to raise them to say that, well, your love language is going to be quality time because that's mine.
Right.
That might not be so, right? They may all they may want is for their mom and their dad to say, you did a good job. I love you today.
Yes.
That is sufficient. I know my love language is words of affirmation. And growing up, I got none of that because I wasn't raised with my mom and my dad. I was raised by my grandmother. So I guess for me, because I didn't get it growing up, it developed into something I really wanted, therefore it became my love language. gifts meant very little to me. But I can appreciate if, let's say, for example, you, Kat, that was your love language, and I'm trying to show you that I care about you.
Right.
You need to identify what is going to make, instead of us telling them what's going to make them happy, we should ask them what's going to make them happy. Have you had those types of conversations with the parents you work with?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm so glad you said that, because it's 100% true. It is definitely about acknowledging what makes them happy. Like my oldest, her love language is gift giving, not necessarily gift receiving. She doesn't care if she gets them. Of course, she appreciates them, but for her, she shows people love by making them something and giving it to them. Or if she sees something while we're out and about and she can afford it, she'll buy it for the person. And that's great. My middle, her love language is 100% physical touch. She loves to be cuddled. And so it is very important to pay attention to what each individual wants. And I love that you said ask them, because they will tell you.
So I know you're about to share some pearls of wisdom before I unfortunately interrupt you. So please continue on how we can identify the love language of those we are looking to assist, in this case, our children, and how we can be better at acknowledging what they want instead of us telling them what they want.
It's so important to truly listen to your children, to ask the right questions, to literally just say, what do you want in this moment? How can I help you in this moment? A lot of parents I see think they know what their kid needs, so they just do it. And, you know, I've been in that situation. My oldest, when she would get hurt, I jump up and I start doing what I think she needs. And she used to get very mad at me until I finally stopped and said, when you get hurt, what is it you want me to do? And what it turned out, because if I did nothing, she thought I didn't care. But if I jumped up and started doing what I thought she needed, she'd be angry at me too. So all I have to do now is say, I am here when you're ready. Please let me know how I can help you. She takes a couple of minutes to like breathe through it. And then she says, can you get me an ice pack, or can I just have a hug, or whatever it is she needs in that moment. And that's how you're going to find out so much about your child, is just ask them questions. Ask what they're interested in. Even, you know, they're reading a series of books, ask them about it. You may not be interested in the book, but if you show that you care what they're interested in, it makes them feel important. Just let them tell you all about it.
Gone are the times where you could turn around and say, Kat, you know what? There's food on the table. There's a roof over your head. What do you have to complain about? Well, actually, I have a lot to complain about. You're never home. I don't know who you are anymore. It's different, right? Because I look at my grandparents and they're married for thousands of years, it seems, right? But they made it work in a different time. And I think sometimes people forget that it's like a two-edged sword, right? Like you have the male perspective is I'm giving. What more can I give? And then someone may say that he isn't present with me. Like he's here, but he's not here, right? Like you get that. And sometimes, sometimes the men will say to the woman and vice versa, right? But I think what's lacking, and we talked about it earlier and you mentioned it, you expand on it so eloquently, is that instead of pointing the finger and saying that this person isn't doing this, how about you just ask them? Right? Like, I think it could be, honestly, ladies and gentlemen, I think it could be that easy. We just say, hey, I understand that you're working hard 12 hours. I understand that you're always keeping the home clean, that you're taking care of the children. But what is it that you want from me? Because I know what I want from you. Right?
Exactly.
Is that type of conversation lacking with the parents? And then ultimately it will be lacking with the children of that marriage?
Absolutely. I'll give you an example. When I first had my first child, I had expectations in my head of how my husband was going to show up as a dad. But I didn't talk to him about that. I just had the expectations. And when he didn't show up in that way, I got resentful. I got angry. And honestly, I acted like a child. He worked anywhere from 12, 15, sometimes 16 hours a day during the week. On the weekend, he slept in Saturday and Sunday. And I got angry because I'd wake up. I'm like, I know he works hard, but I'm working 24/7 with this baby. Plus, I still had a job on top of it. And when he wouldn't get up in the morning, instead of asking him to, I would walk around with the baby slamming drawers and stomping my feet as I walked, anything to disturb his sleep, because it wasn't fair he got to sleep in and I didn't. Until and that didn't encourage him to really want to show up for me, right? Like, if I'm being this big old brat, why is he gonna get out of bed? He doesn't want to be around me. So finally, I sat him down and I said, hey, look, I just don't feel like this is fair. I get up every single day with the baby. I'm exhausted. I'm up through the night. And he was like, oh, he had, like you said, the expectation of, I work hard, I provide. When I come home, I want to rest. And then when I explained to him how I felt, he was like, all right, well, how about Saturdays I sleep in so I can catch up from the week. Sundays I'll get up early with the baby and you can sleep in. I'm like, it was that simple. I could have said that 9-10 months ago instead of walking around angry all the time.
I wonder sometimes I always wonder what causes someone not to want to have that type of conversation. And some of the things that I come up with is the fear or maybe the uncertainty of the answer that they will receive.
Yeah. Because what if he said, too bad, it's your job?
Yeah.
Right?
What if he said, what are you talking about?
Because he really didn't see it. He didn't know there was a problem. He didn't understand why I was so angry. And I think a lot of it too is the stories we tell ourselves in our head. Like, I told myself a story of he was selfish and he was, just like he was the one being a brat. And I judged him off that story instead of talking to him.
I dated someone that was the same way. She would present stories to me or situations that happen. And I would ask her, when did that happen? Because it wasn't even in reality sometimes. And she's like, oh yeah, it was a dream that I had. I was like, so I'm responsible for the dream that you had? Or like, to your point, they'll just say that they'll just dream up something. They'll be like, he's a jerk. She's a jerk because she's not doing this. But then when you confront the person, or when you ask them that, hey, I want you to do this, a lot of times a person will be like, okay, yeah, I'll start doing it as soon as possible. Like you said, it's that simple. Because if the person loves you, if the person is married to you, if the person is creating life with you,
right?
The chances are most of the time they're going to say, sure, no thing.
Right.
Right. But in our minds, we think it's going to be like a nuclear war where there's going to be all these casualties on each side. And we just dream up the situation. What are your thoughts on why sometimes we let the stories in our mind impact our reality in that way?
I think when we don't have self-awareness, when we don't understand that that's what we're doing, we truly believe the stories that our brain tells ourselves. We don't understand that we're not our thoughts, and that these stories that we tell ourselves, our brain looks for explanations and tells us reasons why somebody's acting some way, and then we just believe it. And so then we treat them based off that. And once you start to understand how your unconscious and your conscious mind work, and you realize that the brain's looking for an answer and giving it to you, but it may not be the other person's reality, then you start to say, oh, hold on, I'm making judgments based off things I don't even know are true. Let me just talk to the person and find out the truth.
I wonder if we can start to mesh the fantasy and the reality, because we should fall in love and continue to love the reality version of the people that we decide to spend our life with, right? But sometimes we get caught up in the fantasy, and that allows us to dislike this person, or worse yet, we fall in love with the fantasy of the person. And then in real life, we're like, ugh, I married that. I made kids with that. Right. And I think maybe
Sure.
I listened to some of the stories of my friends who are single parents and single parents, mothers and fathers.
Mhm.
And a lot of times that's what they would tell me because they thought the person was this way when they got to know them. They're
Yeah.
another way, but now they're invested in
Right.
children.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely.
Do you speak to single parents and help them along their journey as well?
I do. I do. Absolutely. And part of that, yes, it, it's the fantasy you create about the other person and the expectations you have of how they'll show up and all of that. But part of it is also, it's been years since you got married. People change. And I was just talking, my husband and I are currently separated, and we just had a very deep conversation about this, how we've been married 21 years. We were different people 21 years ago. At the same time, at that time, he checked all the boxes and I checked his boxes off where, okay, I didn't know myself though. I had no self-awareness of who I truly was. I didn't know what I really wanted in life. And through the years, we've had our ups and downs for sure. And we are currently at a stage where we've both been doing a lot of healing work, and we see that we don't check each other's boxes anymore. A lot of that is as I gained self-awareness and started my healing journey, I realized I'm not the same person. I have different values. And our values just aren't so much in alignment anymore, whereas we want different things in life. And that's okay. Instead of trying to force it to fit for the kids, it is so much better to allow each other to live the lives we truly want. And the kids can see that it's okay to put yourself first and not force yourself to stay in a relationship where you don't want the same things.
I love that analogy that you use where you're checking the boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say this, Kat, the reason why I say that is I do the same thing, maybe not necessarily in a relationship aspect, but I do it maybe once or twice a year, just in life, because in my 20s, I was so determined to be a certain type of man.
Sure.
Right. So probably you're the same way when you're growing up. You're like, there's this type of woman I want to become, and I'm going to work hard to become that woman. Right. It may have included a wife or a mother, whatever the case is. Once I became that man, I was like, oh, this is it. I still have a lot of life to live. Right. I still have a lot of life to live. And then I was like, okay, what else can I do with the type of person that I became? So I wanted to help others become who they wanted to be. That was checking my boxes.
Yeah.
But the terrain, let's say 5 years ago, is not the terrain today. My boxes are different. I still want to check them off.
Absolutely.
But they're different. Just like how 20 years ago, 21 years ago, your boxes were checked. Now you're like, hey, I'm a different cat. And I'm just using the play on words, guys. Actually, her name is Kat. It's a play on words, right? She's a different person. Right?
I like that.
So she's a different person. And it's okay to reevaluate, because what worked then for that person, for that version of you, may not work now. And I say that because it can be scary. It's scary enough to lose friends from the changes you make.
Absolutely.
It's probably even scary to say, hey, I dedicated some time with this person. Like, how did you feel when you realize that this may not be the direction I want to go to any longer?
Oh, that's an extremely hard decision to make. And the cat 20 years ago, probably my biggest goal was to be a wife and to be married forever. I was never going to get a divorce. And we haven't gotten a divorce at this point, but it was like, when we said we were getting married, I'm like, this forever. Both of our moms had been married 4 times. That's what we both grew up with. And we were like, nope, we're not doing that. We're not going to do it to our kids. This is absolutely forever. And I had not one doubt walking down that aisle, because we did check each other's boxes at that time. And, I see so many people getting married and they're like, oh, I don't know. Is this a good idea? This is forever. And they'd be all scared about it. I'm like, then why are you doing it if you're scared? Like, I had not one doubt. I love this man. I still love him. I always will. So to get to a point this many years later where it's like, oh man, we're just not checking each other's boxes anymore. And do we keep living like this when we're not completely happy, or do we learn to put ourselves first? That is an extremely hard decision to make. And I'm not going to lie, it took years to get to the point of being like, okay, this has to happen because, one, it's the best thing for me. But two, if it's the best thing for me, then it is the best thing for my kids, because I'm going to be a happier person. I'm going to show up better for them. And they're going to see that always put yourself first.
And I want everyone to understand that the kids always know.
They know
if there's anything going on in the house or anything like that. So to those who are out there thinking that you're doing it for the kids, that's very noble thought to have. But
right.
like I said, I grew up without my mother, my father. They divorced maybe 15 years after I met them. So it wasn't that long. Right. And like I knew, even though I didn't know these people growing up, they missed the first steps, they missed the first words. I knew that something wasn't right. And I was in my teens. Like by the time they divorced, I was 18. So I met them when I was 5. So 14 years, 13 years they're together. Right.
Okay.
And I share that with everyone to let them know that the kids, they pick up on these things. Kids are very, very intuitive.
They are. And that is something I discuss in my book as well. Not necessarily around whether you should be divorced or not, but in general, like my book is all about emotional intelligence, because I truly, truly believe if we can teach our kids now to feel their failings, to recognize them, to see that there's something deeper, like maybe I'm acting out in anger right now, but ask yourself why. And my kids can stop and say, oh, I'm actually sad about something that happened with my friend, and I didn't deal with that. And now I'm showing up in anger here with my siblings. And I think if you can do that, they will grow up to have less depression and anxiety and not people please. But the point of that is one part in my book is be their example, feel your failings, and do not lie to them about it. And I say, like, if your kid comes to you and says, are you okay? And you're not, say no. Because they already know, or they wouldn't be asking. But when you say, oh, I'm fine, honey, they start to not trust their own instincts anymore, because they're like, well, I swear I can tell by her body language and the energy I feel off of her that she is sad or not doing well right now, but she's telling me she's fine. And I'm supposed to believe my mom no matter what she says. So I guess I was wrong. And then they stop trusting those instincts. And they don't believe in themselves anymore. And that's just not fair. So I will always tell my kids, every time they say, are you okay? If I'm not, I say, no, I'm not. And if they ask why, if it's an appropriate thing and I'm okay with talking to them about it, I'll tell them, well, this happened and I feel sad about it, or I'm upset about it. And if it's not something that is appropriate to talk to them about, I'll just tell them, it's not something I want to talk about right now. However, thank you for asking, and maybe you could give me a hug and that will help, or whatever I feel in that moment. But I never lie to them about how I feel.
I'm glad you're developing the trust in your children to understand their gut feeling, their intuition.
Yeah. That is huge.
It is, because once they leave outside the home, you want them to understand, okay, this area is dangerous, and let me trust that.
Yes.
Right? Because if you put them in a situation where they're going to doubt it, who knows what can happen to your children? They can end up in dangerous situations, dangerous people, dangerous relationships, right?
Yes.
Because instead of saying, I don't know about this person, their energy is kind of off, it doesn't match my energy, they're going to be like, it's not a big deal, because when I used to do it with my mom or my dad, They used to say that, oh, don't listen to that. Everything is perfectly fine, even though they knew it wasn't.
Right.
Right.
And they believe they're protecting their child when they tell them they're fine, but they're not. They're really not.
As we close, what's something that you'd want to tell the next generation of men and women who are coming up, trying to be potential parents, wives, husbands, but they need a little bit of guidance? What would you tell them?
I wish that everyone knew this before they had kids, because it is harder once you have kids. But the most important thing you can do is work on yourself, to start healing your own traumas, become self-aware of who you truly are, become emotionally intelligent yourself so that you're not deflecting your own emotions and shoving them down, because the more you shove them down, the worse they come out later, whether that's in a blow up because you didn't deal with your anger, so it comes up irrationally over something minute. You're going to stop people pleasing. You're going to put yourself first. It is so important to do all these for you first, so you can then teach it all to your kids.